Right, let's focus on international news now. Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has urged NATO to help with unrestricted military aid.
Today marks a month since Russia invaded Ukraine. Zelenskyy says Kyiv needs military assistance without restrictions in order to save lives.
Addressing the NATO summit via a video link, he thanked the Western military alliance for help, but appealed for offensive weapons, aeroplanes and tanks. The Ukrainian leaders also accused Russia of deploying phosphorus bombs on Monday. Now, phosphorus can be used as a smokescreen or to burn buildings. White phosphorus weapons are banned in heavily populated areas under international law, but it is not considered a chemical weapon. Well, Amnesty International has today staged a global day of action demanding that Russia end its invasion of Ukraine. The NGO has called the war an illegal act of aggression, resulting in a growing human rights catastrophe. Let's hear from Shenilla Mohamed, Executive Director of Amnesty International South Africa. Shenilla, good evening. Talk to us about this global day of action. What are you hoping to achieve?
Good evening, Sally, and good evening to your viewers. Well, you know, it's been a month since Russia basically, unleashed this human rights catastrophe in Ukraine. And in the space of just 4 weeks, we have seen lives, livelihoods, homes, and infrastructure destroyed. So, you know, what this day is for activists all around from all corners of the globe to speak in one voice and to demand that the Russian authorities put a stop to this wanton destruction and by ending their illegal aggression, and that we're calling for the protection of citizens and the respect for international law. So this is really, harnessing the global voices to bring an end to this carnage.
All right. I want to speak to you a little bit about something that came through from our UN ambassador, Matu Joini, and she delivered a paper today, explanation of the vote on the humanitarian resolution in Ukraine on the occasion of the emergency special session of the General Assembly. Now, what this article is essentially saying, it's explaining South Africa's position to remain neutral. And what essentially it says is that by condemning Russia and saying Russia must, it politicizes it essentially. So I'll read you a little bit of it. It says, unfortunately, instead of placing the humanitarian crisis and our response at the center of our deliberations, the political divisions in this assembly suggest that perhaps in the minds of some delegations, the humanitarian response is secondary to geopolitical objectives. I want to ask you, we're all well aware of the humanitarian situation. What the South African ambassador to the UN is saying, essentially, is that we need to call for a ceasefire.
And that caused the humanitarian crisis. I think it's really playing to the politics. And of course, we understand that, it's all about politics. But at the end of the day, it's important to know that Russia's invasion of Ukraine was a violation of the United Nations Charter and an act of aggression. And this is a crime under international law. So, while it's fine for South Africa to play this avoidance game of declaring this an act of aggression, the reality is that it was an act of aggression, and that it's really important to call on Russia to stop with immediate effect this attack on Ukraine. They're the ones who crossed into the borders of Ukraine and started this whole war. And yes, there is a humanitarian crisis, and as Amnesty International, we have been documenting right from the start these hostile attacks that have been taking place on hospitals, on schools, and also the use of banned cluster munitions. And as far as we're concerned, what Russia has been doing constitutes war crimes under international law. So Amnesty International is documenting this in the determination that there is justice for these crimes. And, we're hoping to provide this essential evidence which can be used to hold perpetrators to account. So for South Africa to, use the humanitarian crisis as a way to avoid, calling out the fact that, yes, Russia is the perpetrator here and Russia is in violation of international law, I think is really quite lamentable. I mean, it was an opportunity for South Africa to show leadership at a global level, and South Africa has failed.
It's interesting what Zelenskyy is saying, that Russia is using phosphorus bombs, which I've just been reading up about it. It is banned in sort of highly populated environments. It's a sort of white smoke, creates a smoke screen, can cause all sorts of problems. You can use it to burn buildings, etc. But Joe Biden has said he's concerned about the use of chemical weapons. I want to ask you whether Amnesty International believes that's a real possibility, that chemical weapons may be used by Russia, and how you go about gathering evidence against Russia, because I'm hearing what you're saying is that there needs to be clear accountability so that any other country ever considering doing something similar realizes there will be dire consequences.
Well, Sally, at the start of the invasion, Amnesty sent in a crisis team into Ukraine, and we also have people operating, in Russia. And I think that what we're doing is we are really gathering the evidence right from the ground as to what's going on. So the mere fact that cluster bombs could be used in highly populated places does not mean that Russia is capable of using any type of weapons. We don't have evidence yet of the use of biological warfare, but if it does get used, I mean, Amnesty has teams on the ground, and we will gather that evidence. And I think for us, what is very, very important is that we gather the evidence in order for the International Criminal Court to be able to take the action that is required, because what is happening in Ukraine is really in violation of international law. And we find it really unacceptable that countries are not recognizing that, and countries that have signed to these international laws, including South Africa, are stepping aside and not wanting to really hold Russia to account, because over 2 million people have now left Ukraine, and it's really the country has been decimated and continues to be decimated, and the crisis is real. And it's all very well to talk about a settlement, but at the end of the day, this is one country that has violated international law, that has been the aggressor in this conflict, and it's not an equal playing ground. It's not a question of, well, if Ukraine stops doing what they're doing, then Russia will stop. Russia is the aggressor, and it's important that countries note that.
Thank you so much. Shenilla Mohamed, Executive Director of Amnesty International, South Africa.